going on, student anglers? Hope you're having a fantastic day. On today's episode, we're going to be going over one of my favorite tactics of all time, and that is a chatterbait. Now, what a lot of people don't know is just how versatile a chatterbait is. It's basically a spinnerbait, a swim jig, and then just a jig in general, all tied into one lure. This makes it extremely effective for hopping it along the bottom, crawling it along the bottom, ripping it through grass, throwing it around cover. It's just a really awesome bait, which is why it happens to be one of my favorites. Now first I want to go over the retrieve of a chatterbait. So when I'm throwing a chatterbait, I like to do a few different retrieves. First, it's the steady retrieve, which is just throwing it out, winding it back in. Nothing to it, it's just simple. It's good for covering a lot of water quickly. Yeah, that's about it. The second one is a yo-yo retrieve. And that's where you let the jig sink to the bottom, the bladed jig, sorry, sink to the bottom. Then you simply yo it up, let it fall, and then just keep yo-yoing it back. And this is good for those more lethargic bass, you know, the ones that aren't really in a feeding mood, but just kind of see the bait and just are like, well, that's a free meal, I'm gonna get it. Especially on that fall, you'll see a lot of times they'll hammer it then. The third retrieve is a erratic retrieve, and what you do is you're gonna want to cast that out there, and when you're bringing it back, you want to jerk it. You jerk your rod, you pause your reel, speed up, stop and go, and this really just makes it look like a fleeing bait fish, a wounded bait fish, a lot of different things that are going to trigger that bass, and it happens to be my favorite retrieve. The final retrieve is you're going to throw it out and let it sink to the bottom and kind of just retrieve it like you would a jig. So you can either just pull it along the bottom, just with a slow drag, pop it a little bit, or even just barely crawl it. And it's a lot like a jig, but it has that blade which adds a little more vibration, and it's just something the bass aren't used to seeing a lot of. And this can be good for like high pressured bass that just have seen everything and they need something a little bit different, and that's when I'll retrieve a chatterbait like that. So next I'll go over the line and equipment that I throw a chatterbait on. So here I have that 7/4 ducket that you saw a video on earlier, and I have 40-pound braid on here with a pretty fast gear ratio reel. I think this is a 7:3 to 1, and the reason for this is because when I'm throwing a chatterbait around grass, I want a rod that can really rip it out of cover. If you get around some grass, you want to be able to jerk it and pop that bait free. And that's the same reason I have braid. First of all, it's sensitive. You can feel everything that your bait hits, but it has that strength and power. The only downside is it doesn't have a lot of stretch. And if I'm in a situation where I need a lot of stretch, that's when I'll throw in maybe fluorocarbon, sometimes mono, although I'm not a huge fan of mono for throwing a chatterbait. And then the length of a rod is also key. I like a 7-foot or above, just so I have that longer rod to get a little bit more distance out of my chatterbaits. And that just allows me to cast farther, and because this cover more ground with the chatterbait, and it just increases your fish catching opportunity. Finally, I'll go over where I throw chatterbaits. So when I'm throwing a chatterbait, I'm not just gonna be throwing it into the middle of the open water with no cover around. I like to throw it right in the thick of cover. So whether that be rocks or structure, and then of course my favorite, grass, because it goes through grass really easily. With that hook on the top, it just kind of cuts through the grass, and I find it really effective for going through grass. So to reiterate that, I go over grass, rocks, and structure as my main targets. Oh, there's a bass right there. Perfect. That's what I'm telling you, they love structure. This is a pretty good one too. See if we can get them in here. That's a nice bass. And that is why I love throwing a chatterbait. I threw that right off some logs and stumps that were in the water, and as you can see, that's a chunky bass, and he hammered it right at the top of the mouth, perfect. Just on, like you saw, that chartreuse chatterbait, chartreuse and white, and that's a nice bass. That's why I throw the chatterbait. It's a crucial bait, especially on windy, cloudy days like that. It really catches fish, and it's just become a staple in my bass fishing tactics. It's go ahead and get a release on her. Well, she's ready to go. So there you saw a few tips and tricks that I like to share when I throw chatterbaits. It just is a super effective bait. It's a bait that I have a ton of confidence in. It's been a real staple for me this spring. So just to reiterate what I went over the type of places I like to throw a chatterbait, which is around a lot of heavy cover grass, logs, sticks, rocks, whatever. Then we went over equipment, and I like to throw it on a longer rod with heavier line. That way I can rip it out of cover and get those bass out when I throw it in the cover. Lastly, I went over retrieves, which was just dragging along the bottom, popping it up, doing a yo-yo retrieve, a steady retrieve, and then of course the erratic retrieve. That is gonna do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get some confidence up and you decide to throw a chatterbait if you haven't before. And if you do throw chatterbaits and haven't had much success on throwing chatterbaits, tie one on. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun way to catch fish. And yeah, it's just a good time. So thanks for watching. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for the continued support here on the Student Angling channel. And as always, fish hard, learn more. I'll see you in the next episode.